Hello everyone, I'm Tony DiMeo, and this is Tony D's Music Channel. And today, I'm going to talk about one of my all-time favorite albums, and what I consider my favorite album by George Harrison. And it's Cloud 9, as you can see that right there, from 1987. Isn't that a fantastic album cover? Let me show you the back. Very cool photo of George Harrison. He looks very, very relaxed. And that's how we want George Harrison. Anyway, this is the comeback album of George's after he took 5 years away from making music to focus on making films because he just got bored and sick and tired of music business, and I can understand why he did. Anyway, here's the vinyl of the album that I bought maybe 2 years ago off of eBay. The much bigger photo that I showed you before. And that's the back of it. Much bigger like before. Much bigger. First, I'm going to tell you how I discovered this album. I was 21 years old, and I was in my third year of college and just surfing videos on YouTube when I looked at the side of the screen as suggested videos and just saw a bunch of George Harrison videos for songs of his that I had never heard before from this album, and being very curious about hearing more of what George and the other three Beatles had that I didn't know before, I listened to all of these songs, and I was absolutely amazed and stunned by what I heard. Although I did hear one song from the album way before that. When I was 16, I heard the song Devil's Radio on a Comcast channel that played classic rock. But anyway, let's get to these tracks, because they're quite awesome. Starting off with the title track, Cloud 9. I absolutely love this song. It starts off with a really cool guitar hook, which I'm quite certain was played by George's friend and confidant, Eric Clapton. The same Eric Clapton who married the same woman, Pattie Boyd, as George Harrison. We'll get into that in a different day. Anyway, the song is fantastic with lyrics about what might happen when he takes a certain lover. He'll show her Cloud 9, share a joke, all things I want to happen if I have a partner. It's such a catchy, fantastic song with just a feel-good rhythm to it. And then I absolutely adore track 2. And while this album is not George at his really preachy, spiritual stage, there are 2 songs on here that I can tell, knowing him as well as I do, that they were a little bit spiritual. And track 2 is like that. That's What It Takes. It's a song that you could read it as being about a romantic interest or about God. I know George. I know him very well. I'm quite certain he meant it to be about God. But it's actually a fantastic song that was written by George and 2 other people. George and Jeff Lynne and Gary Wright. That's What It Takes is such a gorgeous song. And he's really asking if that's what it takes to get into the open door. And I'm quite certain open door means the afterlife. Of course, we think about the song in a romantic sense. The open door could be the open door to meet with your prospective lover and be with them. That's What It Takes is one of those songs in this album that just really invites you to a whole other world. And I consider it to be otherworldly and just absolutely, absolutely gorgeous. And track 3, like I said, continues that trend of a George Harrison song that sounds like it's either spiritual in nature or romantic, and that's the song Fish on the Sand. As you can pretty much tell from that, he's referring to how if he can't be with somebody, he feels like a fish on the sand. Because fish are not meant to be in sand, obviously. They're meant to be in the water. And if he's not with this person, he feels like a fish on the sand. Now, again, what I know about George is that he was incredibly spiritual. So I think we know what he meant by this song. And it's got a really fantastic keyboard riff. It's got such a great rhythm to it. And of course, George and Jeff Lynne played keyboard on this album. Jeff Lynne, what an incredible musician Jeff Lynne was and still is. Jeff Lynne played a bunch of instruments on here. Bass guitar, acoustic guitar. He played keyboard and synth. So did George. Absolutely, absolutely amazing. And track 4 on here is one of my all-time favorite George songs, and maybe my favorite on this album. And that's Just for Today, which I've heard was inspired by his friend Ringo being alcoholic, and how alcoholics have this pamphlet that says, "Just for today, I will try to live through this." I've always heard that song as being about loneliness and being about someone feeling isolated. And I always related to those feelings in this song. And it's one of those that I always thought of. And it's a song that I always thought about when feeling depressed and lonely myself. And for a while, I would listen to this song and almost try and envision a film in my mind inspired by the song about someone who's really lonely and down on their luck. I just love the lyrics so much. It just for today, I could try to live through this day only. For just one night. It's just for today. I could try to live through this day only. For just one night. It's such an underrated song in the Georgia catalog. And the track after Just for Today is This Is Love, which is an absolutely perfect pop music masterpiece. It really should have been a #1 hit single. It's such an artistic crime that it wasn't. This Is Love is just, in my opinion, that song has the same message and the same ethos in the lyrics as the Beatles song Within and Without You. Because both songs in their lyrics are really preaching about how to reach inner peace within yourself. But This Is Love teaches you that to have inner peace within yourself, you need to figure out how to solve your own problems. Because it teaches us that all our problems can be overcome, much like in the Beatles song Within and Without You. And it has that perfect music video where George is on the beach. And it's one of those songs where it just feels like you're on the beach listening to it. And I just... there is no more perfect pop song from the late 80s in my opinion. I think it's absolutely a masterpiece of music. And it's just so awful it wasn't more popular. If that had been 10, 15 years earlier, I could see it being #1 on the charts. If you listen to just one song from this album, play This Is Love. That's my message to you all. And speaking of the Beatles, the next track is full of references to the Beatles, since it was 20 years after Sgt. Pepper, and that's When We Was Fab, a track that Ringo himself played on, since he was one of the 3 drummers on this album. Ringo himself and Jim Kellner, MVP's session drummer, and Roy Cooper. But When We Was Fab is full of references to Beatlemania, of course, with great lyrics like Woke Up in a Daze, Life Is Over, Like This Pulver You Sent to Me. And it is funny that Paul, in the same year, was trying to do a song about the 60s called Return to Pepperland, which was never released, only on bootleg form. But this George song is just absolutely catchy pop music masterpiece. And it's got a great music video with references to the Beatles. And next, we have the track that first introduced me to this album, and that is Devil's Radio. Now, George was always somebody who absolutely hated the media and the press of all forms. And this song is George complaining about gossip on the radio, which back in 87 wasn't nearly as bad as it is now. If he was still alive now, he'd be writing a lot more songs about gossip on the radio and on TV. But Devil's Radio, if you love hard rock songs, it is the most rockin' song on the album, and one of the most hard rockin' songs in George's whole catalog. But it's got that signature guitar hooks from Eric Clapton, of course, George's friend. And it starts off with, gossip, gossip, I hear you gossip. It's such a fun rocker that everyone can rock out to. And of course, who doesn't hate the vicious gossipers in the news media like George Harrison does? He's such a great stand-in for all of us. And then we go to another one of my favorite songs from the album, and one of my favorite songs from George in his whole career, and that's Someplace Else. Like Just for Today, it's clearly a song about feeling isolated and feeling sad. And while it was written for this awful, awful movie with Sean Penn and Madonna, I don't really care about that movie. I never knew what had to do with that movie until years after I heard it. But let's forget about that movie. The movie being Shanghai Surprise. But the song is better than the movie. The song is just so utterly eerie and sad. Yeah, it's about two people who find each other when they're both really down in life. And I relate to the lyrics so much. And it's always been a favorite of mine. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. And I love personal songs like that about feeling sad. And what's great about the album is we go right from that really sad song to a very humorous, wry rocker called Wreck of the Hesperus. If you know anything about George Harrison, you know that he's the funniest Beatle with an endless sense of humor that's always hilarious. And this song is full of silly, wry jokes about George getting older. As old as my mother, as George sings in the song. As old as Big Bill Brunsey. I didn't even know all the lyrics in this song until many, many years after I first heard it, when I would just read them online. It's full of the most humorous lyrics. Met some Oscars and Tonys. For some good humor, that's the perfect George song. And then next is what I consider one of the most gorgeous songs George ever wrote. And it's called Breath Away from Heaven. I absolutely love this song here. It uses oriental sounding music to take you to this other world where suddenly in another life, as he sings, somebody is woken up in a castle and an enchanting beauty is there, probably a woman, who, according to George, can take your soul away without you knowing. Sounds very mysterious. Now, when I hear this song, I always think of my favorite movie, Beauty and the Beast, which takes place in a castle with someone so beautiful, Emma Watson, she can take your breath away. It's one of those songs I just enjoy so much because it's full of It's just full of love. It was made with love. It's about love. It's about beauty. But beauty that takes your soul away. And that's just absolutely beautiful. And now I'm going to bring you to the last official track on the album. Got My Mind Set on You. Now, spoiler, this is my least favorite song on the album. And I say that because George was such an amazing songwriter. He did not need to do a cover song like that. But he covered that song because he's been in love with it since the early 60s, when he discovered it from a record he had gotten in Illinois. I Got My Mind Set on You is a great song to sing along to and dance to, but it's not much more than that, in my opinion. I really wish George had just put one of his own songs on the album in its place. He could have put on the album Lay His Head, which was a B-side on the Got My Mind single. The B-side was Lay His Head. Now, story time about Lay His Head, that was one of the 4 songs that was rejected by Mo Ostin at Warner Bros. Records in 1980, when George Harrison submitted an album to them. They rejected 4 songs, one of them being Lay His Head. And honestly, it doesn't make any sense why they would reject that song. It has commercial pop appeal written all over it. Lay His Head is a lovely, fantastic song all about the stress that George was under during Beatlemania, when he and the other Beatles could barely find time to lay their heads down, so to speak, because they were so busy. And it's a phrase he took from the Bible, actually, lay his head. And George just sang his heart out in that song, Lay His Head. And he's singing about love. He's singing in the chorus, I love you. I'm not really sure who to. Probably to everyone, because he did love everyone, he would say. And yes, I would prefer the album had Lay His Head on it as opposed to Got My Mind Set on You. No offense to that song. It's nice. It's really good. But Lay His Head is 5 times better because George Harrison wrote the song. And I also want to speak about the production on this album. I have heard many people criticize the album for having bloated production or being overproduced, to which I say complete and utter hogwash. This album was produced by Jeff Lynne of the band Electric Light Orchestra, which is either my 3rd or 2nd favorite band of all time. I'm not sure where they rank exactly. It depends on what year it is. But I always loved how his albums were produced on those albums by Electric Light Orchestra. I think every album he's produced or had a hand producing just sounds perfect. And to me, this album is produced perfectly. To say it's overproduced is absurd. It has the perfect amount of instruments on there. And, I mean, it has 3 drummers. And you can kind of tell that by listening to the album. You got Ringo, Jim Kellner, the greatest session drummer of all time, in my absolute opinion. And you got Roy Cooper on percussion and drums. And you've got Elton John on piano on a few tracks. You've got Gary Wright on organ on a few tracks. You've got Eric Clapton on guitar. How could you say it's too much production? I could think of plenty of other albums and other artists where their albums are not produced highly enough. I love hearing electric sounding albums like this, pun fully intended. And this album, by the way, is perfect if you're going to go exercise somewhere on a track or on a treadmill. I had it on my iPod when I was 21, so I can remember being on a treadmill and playing the album. It's the perfect 40-minute, approximately, album. And it's just, if you're in a bad mood, put on this album, and I guarantee you your mood will be turned around. If not, something is wrong with your mind. This is absolutely a perfect album. There's no doubt about that in my mind. None. And I'm wearing my Traveling Blu-rays t-shirt right now with George and with Jeff Lynne, who produced the album with him. And they made a perfect pair. And so yeah, if you're a huge fan of this album like I am, then please write a comment or two in here saying how much you love it. If you don't like it, you can comment as well and tell me why, and I will not agree with you at all. But this is an album I will continue playing constantly, for sure. I would love to one day get a deluxe remix / reissue with the bonus tracks that were recorded around the time of the album from the Harrison estate. That would be nice, very nice. We'll see what happens with that. I'm not going to hold my breath. But this is perfect right now. Absolutely perfect. And this vinyl is perfect. I love the vinyl so much. And the 45 of Leia's head and Got My Mind Set on You is absolutely perfect. And then you have the song, If That's What It Takes, as the B-side to the A-side of the song Cheer Down, which sounds absolutely amazing on vinyl. Yeah, this is an absolutely amazing album, and thank you so much for listening to me talk about it.